any vehicle. Truck takes up more space. The congestion, it doesn't matter how heavy the. I think it is.
Yeah.
So he's helping our force by arguing the same point with. I don't know who's going to succeed. At least we're on the second one.
Yeah, I mean, people that are
Yes.
pulling for it. So it's
Doesn't count. We have six technical members. Yeah, you've got 6 members, and do we have at least 2 of the 3? People must be out to the election today. We're looking after their kids.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Technical Advisory Committee meeting to order. And we'll go to the determination of a quorum.
Roll call: Paul Agnello,
Here.
Jamie Jackson, Matthew Lehane,
Here.
Bassam Amin,
Here.
Kathy Coffey, here, Adam Derrick.
Here online.
All right, Melody Fowler here, Amy Garbarini, Kate Gibson here, Christine Hefner, Leon Hughes, Daniel Koenig, Kathy Lord here, Stephen Miner, Nick Ruiz,
Here.
Bob Schneider, Rodney White,
Here.
and Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. All right, so the next item is the approval of the technical committee agenda for today, November 4th. Are there any comments on the agenda?
Motion for approval?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. This brings us to the policy committee meeting with Mr. Newell.
Thank you, Chair. The chair's asked that I review the policy committee agenda, but also just give a very brief update on the governance conference. So if we just start with the policy committee, if you can scroll down, I don't go over the things you've already seen, like the TIP amendments, you've seen all those. The bike ped complete streets plan, Carrie just shared why we're doing it and what it is. Everybody seemed happy with that. The travel demand model update. Leader did the presentation. Most of that you've seen, or you're going to see it today. But the policy committee approved the resolution to adopt the new travel demand model, which is great. The bylaws, the change has been approved. That change merely gives the policy committee the opportunity to up to at maximum twice a year hold an online policy committee meeting, provided it follows all of the 3 days public notice, it's open to the public, blah, 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 all of those things. That came about because of a change to the Virginia law that made accommodations for online meetings. We did this, you'll remember last 6 months ago or so, we changed the TAC agenda to allow that. Just remember that those meetings have to follow all of the other rules. You still have to have the public notice, you still have to send out the agenda, you still have to have a quorum, you still have to have everything else, public comment, you still have to have it open to the public and all of those other things. It just means that if there's an emergency, there's a flood or there's a snowstorm like we had before or whatever, we can call an online meeting instead of an in-person meeting if the roads become impassable or some other, or there's an emergency, we need to approve something urgently and not everybody can come in person, you can then have an online meeting. So that's done on the policy committee agenda as well. Policy committee bylaws, I beg your pardon. Just the notice that we GWRC board approved the extension to our on-call consultants for an additional year. It's 3 years since we went to the market for those, and we've extended 1 more year. We can extend only 1 more time, and then we have to start again and put it out to bid. We just gave an update on the locality inputs and functional classification. Remember, that's all been sent to BDOT, and BDOT's now going through a process of internal review. So, you know, some of those they might agree with, some they might not. We'll wait to see what those results are. And those other reports, I think you have all of them. The public meeting for the river crossing is on the 20th, just a reminder. There are the details. So just as part of my administrative slides, we showed these two maps. Now, actually just stop there, scroll up. What I showed the policy committee is this. Those 2024 and 2025 numbers are obviously an estimate. And those two columns are my own calculations. What I base that estimate on is the rate of increase before COVID. So it's conservative. So it may be that your locality is faster than the two columns, taking a more conservative number. But you can see the effect. Over 4.5 years, we add a population the size of the city of Fredericksburg to the region. That is a significant amount of people. And if that trend continues, let's say every 4 to 5 years, even if it's every 6 years, we're adding another Fredericksburg to the 3 localities. The reason I wanted to show that is it gives you an idea of the size of the population growth, right? I don't know whether it eventually stops because there's not enough construction of homes or there's not enough whatever else. But at the current rate, we're adding the city of Fredericksburg to the region in terms of population numbers. And that is why we're going to get more and more congestion if it continues. Okay, carry on. So that's the 22 congestion. We've blown it up and put it on the wall for you. So that's the left map on the wall if you can't see the screen because the colors on the screen aren't always great. There it is. You can see that's 2022, basically call it current congestion. This is 2050, which is the next map. And you can see the congestion significantly increases. This is the full build map. We've asked for a 2050 no build one last week, so we'll get that as well. But it's generally a bad result, but there are some wins. You'll see if you look at Route 2 here, coming out of the city, I think over there, it actually improved. Here, you've got a yellow and a red, and here you're starting to so the infrastructure in the constrained long-range plan that we're going to build, or that we say we're going to build, there are places where improvements occur. There's another one in Spot C, I forget here, you could see here, no.
Yeah.
I forget, anyway, I found another one in Spot C where there's actually improvement because we built infrastructure, it gets better. But you can see a lot of it gets worse. Stafford is a huge amount of congestion. Route 3, it's not the closed section, but right out here, Route 3 becomes a problem because of construction that's happening in our neighboring county, depending on whether the court case is successful or not, we don't know. But they've factored in that those homes will get built in Orange County, I believe it is. You can see 208 gets worse too. Over here, it's starting to get little bits of congestion, but by 2050, if we don't do anything more, that's what it is. This does include the construction of the Harrison interchange, but it does not include any river crossings. So no river crossings are factored into this, but the Harrison Road interchange is factored into this.
Did you all figure out the same?
Yes. There's a centroid that's pulling the data, but it doesn't match the roadway. So we've asked them to rebuild it. It's one error we found. Well, not an error, but you know, every time you rebuild the model, they add more of the smaller roads in. So Santa Court Parkway was never fully shown in the model all the way up to Ramp Church Road. Right, there was a gap there that was never formally drawn in following the actual pathway in the model, but there is a centroid behind the scenes that actually captures data. So we've asked them to draw in the proper connection up here of Centerport, no,
Yep.
yes, up there of Centerport Parkway up to Raymond's Church, which doesn't exist. It's operating somewhat in the model, but it's not following the correct path of the roadway. The central one goes right through the middle of the airport. So obviously they need to fix that. So we've asked them to do that. So we're going to rebuild these models, and when that's added, they'll just for safety's sake rerun the model. I'll send you copies once I have them. But it does give us pause in terms of whether our CLRP projects are going to be sufficient to deal with the coming congestion, and it doesn't look like they will. And we will need to think about that. So we're going to do part of our project FINA, going to just internally as a staff look at what's likely to happen with our constrained long range plan list of projects. Obviously some come off because they're already built, but the cost of them will go up. So we need to think about what the outcome is of that list, and then probably have some sort of discussion in the future as to what changes we think, apart from projects in smart scale, which may not get funded, which we will have to add, but there might be other projects which we think we need to add because congestion is not getting better. We have got the 4 OmniRide commuter routes in the model. We have got the updated freight transit routes and frequencies in the model. We have got the VRE additional trains in the model. So we have accounted for the amount of transit we expect. But still, you can see we've got a ways to go. There's going to be a lot of congestion in the future if we don't find ways to deal with that. The policy committee has asked that we work on a letter to the secretary and send the congestion maps with it to say, can we have a conversation about what the state's contribution is going to be towards this future congestion problem. I'll tell you here, but I am having discussion with VDOT central office because I'm not really sure that the secretary is going to dive into this problem. We may have to talk to VDOT staff to work out, because this is new to us because we've just updated the model. But as you know, every region has a model and they don't all update their model in the same sequence, in the same time. So every model in the state of Virginia has not been updated and approved now. They have a different schedule. We have to do it every 5 years, but there'll be one that comes up next year, one the year after. They're all, over the place in terms of timing. But if they were all done today, it's not our region alone that would look like this. You would see multiple regions in the state of Virginia like this. But we are currently concerned about it because we've just got the first model run out of the new model.
Yes, Christian.
If the projection stands for congestions 2050, does FAMBO ask the counties maybe to reserve right-of-ways, or this is just too early?
So the people in this room represent the various jurisdictions, and we show these and provide data and all of that and encourage the jurisdiction representatives to talk internally about it. We don't like to go into your jurisdiction and start telling you what to do. So we don't do that, but we encourage you to think about this problem and what we should do about it. And as part of the long range plan update that we have to do, well, we have to have finished 2 years from now, we should talk about how jurisdictions will deal with the congestion problem. It will then feed into the constrained long range plan. If you can think of projects that would help this, that you want to put in there, then we would take inputs from all jurisdictions as to what projects should be put in the new constrained long range plan, which we should update then after June when we know if we're getting our smart scale projects approved. What's going to happen is we'll either get none of our small scale projects approved, or we're going to get 1 or 2 approved, and those will be big projects because we've submitted much bigger projects this time. So if they approve even one, it's going to be a significant project, which would have an impact on this, and a number of them are not in the current constrained long-range plan, so that would provide additional capacity. But we have no idea which ones are going to score well. We have no idea which ones they're going to vote to approve, to fund. We have to wait and see. So it's another process. I have shared this with the policy committee, so it's, you know, the politicians from the jurisdictions are now becoming aware that, you know, this problem, and I guess they'll look to all of you for suggestions as to what to do next. They've asked me to start preparing a letter, and I'm meeting with one of the senior VDOT people in central office to just talk about what does one do in this situation. The question I was asked is that doesn't this feed into the VTrans needs? And of course, there's a problem there because the central OIB doesn't come to us and say, please send us your model. You know, they do their own data analysis independent of us. And so they're going to put out the new VTrans needs list in January.
They don't consider,
We don't know what's in there. Exactly.
they don't consider future stuff, to be transparent well. They don't consider a majority of our roadways for congestion.
They're supposed to work 7 years in advance now.
Smart scale.
Yeah, for smart scale. Previously, they didn't even do that, but now they're supposed to look at congestion up to 7 years out
For smart scale.
for small scale.
Is that confirmed that they're doing that for the V-Trans methodology as well?
I don't know. They put out the goals and objectives, and now they're going to put out the list of needs in January. So we'll see then. I don't know. They don't. OIB tends to be somewhat independent. They don't like to be interfered with as much.
You mentioned that the 2050 congestion map, the model includes our service. This is the service that we gave you from the most recent system plan update,
At the
right?
time, whatever you submitted at the time, when we asked for it for the model, that's what's been put in there. But again, these 2050 model projections are kind of a rough look at the future. And in fact, rail, and I mean, other people are free to disagree, but rail is the only transit that really makes a significant impact on congestion if it's fast, frequent, and reliable, right? Local buses around the world, unless they've got 10-minute headways and 1,000 buses on that route, don't significantly impact congestion. There are not enough buses to do that.
Well, and actually, I mean, the other point I was going to make is that increased local roadway congestion, we feel is going to have a negative impact on our ridership in the future, because if you live somewhere on 208 today and it takes you 30 minutes to get to the station, and then in the future it takes you 45 or 50 minutes, that reduces the travel time competitiveness of switching.
That's what we've been thinking about. It's like, how do we get people to the train stations if all the roads are blocked?
Right.
That's a problem.
Because we're, you know, our market's on the eastern side of all of your jurisdictions. All your growth is on the western side.
Correct.
There's a mismatch.
There is a big mismatch.
Has to be reconciled in the next 25 years.
And we're hoping that DRE and DRPT, who's part of this body, will work with us in finding solutions to that. The more people I can get off I-95, better, because it just doesn't get any better.
We had a new road for data center development a month ago. How do you want us to go about it? Send it to you and maybe we can add it something.
Yeah, so they've moved from updating the model every 7 years to updating the model now every 5 years. So we just finished. We're actually late. We delayed them. We all agreed to delay the model update because the National Household Travel Survey data wasn't yet available. And the various transit agencies were all busy undergoing changes. Fred Transit was doing their strategic plan. BRE was reworking their future, what do you call it?
System plan.
System plan. And OmniRide was busy adding those extra 3 routes. And so we waited for that dust to settle, and we waited for the National Household Travel Survey results to come out before. So we are a year behind. We should have finished this a year ago. But, you know, within 4 to 5 years, well, before 4 years from now, they'll already be busy building the new one. So obviously all those things need to get treated better in the process. But if someone is doing a study earlier than that, we need to alert the consultant doing the study to add that roadway.
So we'll be glad, Matthew, as you know, send the plat of the plan and the, typical road section, and then the, in-service date of the road, as well as you can estimate, and I'll start building a file with it.
Okay, yeah, we're still waiting on the phasing plan from them, but
Right.
I'll get that over.
Yeah, whenever that
Have it.
stuff is.
Travel
Okay.
model doesn't deal with traffic lights and turning the lanes and all that kind of thing. It just looks at capacity.
We just don't know exactly when.
I mean, you're an expert.
Right. So Ian, what's the timetable on the FINA analysis?
So we're working on it now. So the first block is what we've been showing at the last TAC and in these slides, the policy committee, which was really looking at the model and the maps and the future congestion. Now we want to switch to a little bit of an analysis of our current constrained long range plan. We can't predict the exact amount of funding increase that we'll get. That we'll have to do in June when we get this, but long before June, we want to now in the next 2 months, just do a quick and dirty high level analysis of what's going on. One of the things is that our very large highways are going to experience a brunt of congestion, and the very local small roads are going to experience the brunt. The sort of medium-sized roads tend to fare better in the future in the model. There less congestion happening on those in-between size roads, which was in a table that we shared, I think, last time. Lena, do you just want to flip through there to see if there's anything else of note? That's it. Oh, the Long Bridge, they broke ground on the construction of the Long Bridge. Next one. That's what it looks like. It's actually 4 bridges, 2 rail bridges and 2 bike ped bridges, because the bike ped crowd wanted a thing and they couldn't add it onto the rail bridge, so they're building a separate bridge for that.
3 bridges.
4.
Oh, you've got,
So 2 go to the island and 2 go from the island
oh, yeah, like,
into DC.
you're talking about horizontally, not oh, yeah.
So 4 bridges have to be built.
Yeah.
Next one. Station opening next. That has already happened. Okay, this was just a quick fun. What do we mean by terminology? Just flip through them real quick. Who are bananas? I'll let you know. So we're just looking at terms so that people, when we talk about, we had a member of the public stand here and say, we are NIMBYs, you must listen to us. I'm not sure everybody understood what the terminology is, so I'm just working through some of these terms with Vida and Eugene. What is a NIMBY? What is a YIMBY? Both of those can be bad trends. Both of those can be good trends. It depends. Next slide. Next. There. What is an NIMBYism? Against development generally. We don't want the traffic. We don't want the, not all development is bad. That's the basic thing, right? Development can be bad for local folks, but it can also be good. If we build new transportation infrastructure, it can actually help you. Next slide. EMBism, that's like, yes, build everything. Well, that's also not always the right thing to do. Yes, we do need new housing. Yes, we do need housing that's affordable, which it isn't these days. But not all development is good. You have to put the right things in the right place if you're a good planner. But these are trends. YIMBYs have organizations across the country. I think it started in California. And they lobby and argue for increased housing. Often the housing that gets built tends to be upmarket. They argue for more condos. Well, the condos that then get built are expensive. And that's not necessarily the right goal to aim for. Next. Bananas are the worst case of nobody's built absolutely nothing anywhere. We're gonna also just look at terms like sprawl, urban sprawl. What is sprawl? And things like that over the next couple of months. It's just a very short-term look at terms that people use that fly around, but do we all kind of have the same understanding of what those terms mean? Like, what is urban sprawl? Is it a good or a bad thing? When is it a bad thing? When is it a good thing? Don't know. We're gonna cover terms like that.
These are terms you're gonna cover at future policy committee.
We're doing it with the policy committee members because policy committee members really are not like you all, remember, they're not trained planners or engineers or whatever, project managers. They're elected local residents, right? And sometimes they might be an engineer or a planner, but it's not the norm. And so we just want to start talking about what does sprawl mean, what does transit-oriented development mean, what does, and there's, you know, opinions that they have on sometimes TOD is bad, sometimes mixed use is good, sometimes it's bad. And just want to make sure we all understand the term in the same way.
Yeah, I think you would be well served to even go one step lower and try to get a consensus, a body consensus on what it means to be urban. Because I feel like in a lot of these discussions, the term urban conjures a very different thing. When you talk to the census department, urbanized areas, you know, could be somewhere in the middle of, you know, Spotsylvania County. Well, the person who lives in the middle of Spotsylvania County doesn't consider themselves to live in an urban area. And so I think that is one of the terms that I see get misused or misrepresented, because I think people have like a 1960s, 1970s, you know, conception of what urban is relative to where they might live. And I think that also helps to deprogram people and decharge the conversation when they're talking about development, because not everything is a 25-story in an urban development pattern is a 25-story apartment block, you know, which I think is, you know, inconsistent with the development patterns like in the Fredericksburg area. So it would be helpful for, you know, for people. I think it tends to be in a more like enlightened kind of body politic to be on the same page of these like bigger terms that don't tend to get defined. Everyone just assumes they know what they mean, you know.
Good. Don't want to belabor this.
Yeah.
Because I know we've got a lot of stuff. Just, would you pull up that other slide presentation really quickly? This governor's conference, I'm not going to go into the detail. It was opened by the governor and by the Secretary for Transportation. Both of them made a lot of comments about good stuff happening in Virginia. The amount of funding we're spending on road projects is high. The amount of funding we're spending on upgrading the main rail line for both freight and passenger rails, including some of those bridges we just talked about. They shared that sort of thing. The Secretary for Transportation spoke also about how technology is going to help us out of our congestion problem. I don't know if you recall, was it 1 or 2 years ago, he made a statement which got all of the staff, I think, under him a little smoke. He knows that, and he kind of mentioned that because he described the future as being, we're going to have flying cars that are going to solve our congestion problem, and some of his staff kind of amusedly started teasing him about it. So he's now aware of that, and he kind of made a comment to that effect. But basically, they were talking about the fact that we are investing a huge amount in all of our infrastructure at the moment, and it's a good thing. We have some wins where we're like percentage-wise doing the best or the 4th best in the country or whatever the case is. Next slide. I just thought I'd give you a smattering of the events. There was the opening. We had, unfortunately, a lot of events happening simultaneously. So OIP's quarterly MPO meeting happened at the same time as the House and Senate Joint Committee on Transportation and a panel discussion on electrification. So I went to the OIP meeting because that's where OIP talks about the V-Trans needs, and that was a presentation on that. So I went to that one, so I couldn't attend those other two. They're simultaneous. Next slide. These are just some of the sessions that were handled on the Thursday. Transportation in a post-COVID world. That was actually interesting. The guy from Texas A&M had some great summary slides of what's going on in the US. Unfortunately, his data all ended in 2022, except one slide where he used 2023 data. So, of course, as you all know, 2022 is still, I guess, considered COVID time, and we're now kind of thinking as post-COVID world, it's slightly different.
One comment on that, just back to the travel demand model, 2022 National Household Travel Survey data. So just that's the data that was used in the model. So it's willing and needing.
it wasn't used in an independent fashion. It was used to compare with the data that you all submitted for your TAZs and all that other stuff. So it's a composite. And then the breakout sessions, workforce development, I didn't attend that one. Effective program delivery, that's the one I went to. Future is here. Using AI in transportation, how's that going to work? And then a tour of the Port of Virginia. So I didn't go on the tour. You had anyway, I didn't go on that tour. I went to the effective program delivery section, which was really VDOT talking about new ways of getting projects built, using PPPs, using design build, using all sorts of new ways of effectively getting the project to happen quicker by privatizing some of the intermediate steps effectively. I'm grossly summarizing.
So Ian, just a question on the very top one. So just that question that David Schrank had, can we tech our way out? Did he think we could? Like flying cars or something else?
He's not buying into flying cars,
Okay.
but he just spoke about the trends. The other guy spoke a little bit more about the technology. But I think there's a lot of skepticism around all of the transportation institutions in Virginia as to how soon we're going to have flying cars take over. Airspace is even more complicated than traveling on the ground. So the potential for crashes just goes up because you've got, airspace is controlled in some areas, in other places it's not controlled. The theory, I believe, is that these flying cars are going to be automated. So you're not actually going to be flying it. Whatever system, their problems have to be solved. Next slide. These also happen concurrently. My session for this particular afternoon was interrupted because the fire alarms were sounded, I guess, and we all had to exit the conference center in like short shift. So they shut down all the sessions and everybody had to leave, and it was ages before they managed to get it back together. So we ended up not getting to the end of the session. But those were other sessions that were ongoing. Innovation in transportation, risk-taking multimodal opportunities for freight, land use in transportation, and then major project updates. And these are the kinds of projects like the new tunnels that Hampton Roads and Norfolk are building through the mouth of the harbour port. The new Long Bridge, there was an update by DJ, etc., etc. So that's what that was all about. Next one. Oh, the PDF skewed that a little. Apologies. That was the view from my hotel room out of the port. Future of transportation funding is Friday morning, and then how much is too much? Program delivery and the closing plenary. So that was the thing. I hope that just gives you a few little highlights of what happened. Last year we had a very interesting debate on regional transportation authorities, which was really informative. This year they didn't do anything about that. They focused a lot on technology. How is technology going to help us solve problems? And that was kind of an emphasis throughout the conference.
Ian, did the state come out with any major announcements?
There were awards and that at the end, but there were no major changes that I was able to pick up on.
Very good. Thank you very much for the summary.
Sure. Okay. I'm done.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to public comment. Any members of the public who would like to speak? Please state your name.
You don't know if Alan Watkins, Spalding, and Wayne, in George Washington Division of Stafford County. The population growth is very daunting in the region. I kind of want to tie that into possibly something that I think that the consultant should include in the November 20th meeting that they're going to have. I think it would be important to have a table or some of information show current population growth versus the 2050 growth, so they can see that the congestion and that's going to be caused by the population growth, with no build, et cetera, is still going to hopefully be potentially positively impacted by having the new river crossing. So if they can wind up having that information in there too, I think that would be important to show the reason why this is really necessary. The other thing that I'm concerned with, the format that's going to be at the November 20th meeting is going to be very similar to the one that was done previously. So in other words, there are going to be certain stations where the consultants are having like private little conversations with different groups as they rotate around from option A, B, C, D, or whatever else, whatever other information is provided. The reason that I'm concerned with that is I understand that there'll be a survey that is going to be utilized at that point too. And the concern is that this is going to be, if for those attending the meeting, they're going to have like an instantaneous reaction to whatever is going to be presented to them, which does not really give them time. I'm sure the survey will probably be extended for 30 days or something like that. But the concern is that there's going to be knee-jerk reaction that is going to be included in the service. So being that they're instantaneously going to see something and try to react to it, you know, that's a concern. The other concern is that the information that's presented may not be a real public discussion. It's not a public hearing where people are getting up and having the opportunity to disclose whatever they believe or whatever they want to present. So hopefully down the road, there will be some kind of an additional kind of a meeting where the public does get an opportunity to really know information. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda. Are there any comments on the consent agenda?
Okay, thank you. 2519, was a typo? Thank you. Oh, I'm sure there is. Appreciate that.
Policy meeting on October the 21st.
Could be November 18th.
November, I beg your
All
pardon.
right, thank you so
So
much.
we'll amend that one.
So I guess with that one change, are there any other comments on the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. So that brings us to number 7. I guess we have a fair amount to cover. I would ask that everyone hold their questions until the presenter basically is done. Then we'll take questions. So without further ado, Leland and Brook Station upgrade scope, Mr. Nick Breeze.
Yeah, and thanks, Chair Aniello. I'm going to just give a very brief update on these two projects from the floor here. I didn't prepare anything that, you know, going up on the slides. As was mentioned at the previous FAMPO TAC meeting, we're still working through some details on refining the cost estimate for primarily the Leland parking facility and project. So I'm going to speak to the platform expansions for these two projects, as well as at this time, what we know to be the scope for the Leland Road parking expansion. We will probably, or we will definitely have more information to provide, assuming we don't have a December meeting and I come back to you in January with more updated cost estimates for those two. So I apologize that not everything, you know, is tightened up now, but I think we'd rather get this right and understand exactly what we intend to build before we start telegraphing that to the public. So as far as the Brook Station improvements are concerned, what we're contemplating is a roughly 300-foot extension of the existing platform off the railroad south, that is cardinal west, but railroad south portion of the platform, as well as an additional bridge, you know, walkway over there's kind of a gully there today to the existing parking facility. There's no planned parking expansions at the Brook Station. In the near term, we feel that the level of parking capacity is sufficient for the projected demand post-COVID. And then, what that 300-foot expansion will allow us to do is berth a full 8-car train, which is still our midterm kind of going assumption for the longest consist length that we would be operating an 8-car set. Currently, on the Fredericksburg line, we're operating anywhere from 4-car to 8-car. Only 3, I believe, of our consists are 8-car right now. We are looking in the near term, I would say probably sometime later this fiscal year, to move to kind of a unitary consist length operating paradigm. So we would be running all 6-car trains, and that's just a response to continued lower load factors on the Fredericksburg line. We're doing the same thing on the Manassas line. That should free up some equipment so that when we do get the opportunity to expand service in the next couple of years, that we can do that with the shorter consists and still keep a good spare ratio. So, but we're obviously, you don't build a platform for what you're operating today or even for the next 5 years. We're talking this is a 20 to 50 year decision that we're making to lengthen this platform. So that kind of VRE portion of the Brook scope is pretty well defined. From a VPRA perspective, what they're planning to do at the Brook Station, adding a 3rd track on the far side, so no 3rd track coming through the station, platform area, and that's not scheduled to be constructed until well after 2030. That's in the I can't remember if it's TRV Phase 3 or TRV Phase 4, but it's after the near term, after the Long Bridge projects are completed. So we don't need to worry necessarily about future modifications to the platform for any kind of additional track, 4th track, until well after, the 2040, 2050 time horizon. So really what's programmed there now is a 3-track railroad, an expanded bridge over Brook Road by, VPRA, and then our project would lengthen the platform. And then moving on to the Leland Road Station, kind of a similar situation. VRE is proposing an expansion of 300 feet of platform, again, to make that boarding surface 8-car length. There'd also be an additional access path, pedestrian path to the existing rectangular parking lot, kind of in the northwest corner of the parking lot, or sorry, southwest corner of the parking lot. And there's some grade situations. I think that that platform, part of the platform would be slightly below the level of the parking lot, so there'd be some stairs getting you up to the parking lot grade. One of the other elements of our responsibility for the Leland platform is a pedestrian path that would take you from the north side of the northwest corner of the parking lot, kind of up to Leland Road, and connect in with the existing sidewalk, Stafford sidewalk there at, I don't know what the name of that road is there, the cross street. That is going to be hopefully constructed in conjunction with VPRA's project to widen the clearance under the Leland Road Bridge. I think we discussed at a previous meeting, there's a potential planned closure of several months to reconstruct that bridge to allow for a 3rd track. So same situation, 3rd track going in on the far side, not on the station side. The difference is that's a 2026 project. So that's going to be happening. I mean, construction's probably going to be getting underway in the next 12 months here on the track. So I think the Leland Road improvements, there's a justification for us to get those done, at least on the station side, faster. The parking kind of element, like I said, is still under development. Initially, the concept was to add up to 220 spaces in an area kind of southeast of, like, closer to, and the name of the road is escaping me, the road that intersects with Leland Road at the station.
Primer House?
Primer House, thank you, Primer House Road. And that would be in a depression, 3 sides of retaining walls to make the grades work. The cost estimate of that has gone up fairly significantly, to the point where we're really taking a hard look at, is it still gonna be included in our CIP? Because it has such a high percentage of the funds, of the project unfunded. And B, is it even something that we need even in the post 2030 time horizon?
Except for the parking section only.
The parking section only, yeah. And that's just because when you look at the costs, again, I don't have the final numbers, but just order of magnitude. I mean, you're looking at, a per space parking cost that starts to get close to what you would do in structured parking, or what you'd see in structured parking. So, I mean, there's kind of a, what are we doing here, type of question that we're asking ourselves internally, but that is still the CIP project as we've conceived it. That land, I believe, still is owned by Stafford County, if I'm not mistaken. And so the assumption would be there would be no property acquisition required, that it would be, that land would be transferred to the commissions for use as the parking. Trying to think, anything else? Yes, I guess there would be a necessary stormwater management component to that, and whether or not that would be in a pond or in an underwater or underground facility, that's yet to be determined. But as you can imagine, you want to maximize the parking surface area and minimize the stormwater area, you're going to be spending a lot more putting that under asphalt. So I think by the beginning of the new year, I will have much more refined figures to share with you all, but just know that those projects are only partially funded. And while the platform portions of them are pretty well defined, and I think we feel comfortable pursuing those, because that creates a unified kind of boarding situation down the corridor. The parking is really the sticky wicket here. So done with my short presentation, and happy to take any questions if.
Thank you, Nick. Matthew?
So just to confirm, the bike ped path would be done with the VPRA projects in the next couple of years?
I mean, that's our intention to schedule the construction of those two, so that you're only doing.
So you guys would be doing it, not VPRA?
Well, yeah, that would be under our contract. Yeah.
There's still the issue, I know this isn't you all, but just VPRA is not planning to build any bicycle pedestrian amenities on that bridge. And we potentially have a need for those, so it's something that we'll have to deal with when the time comes, which is now.
Matthew, which is that?
Leland Road over the train tracks.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they're designing the bridge to have wide enough shoulders to accommodate future ped. I mean, I don't know if
Yeah.
you might have more
I
information.
know that's what I've been told. I've also been told, and maybe not. So it's something that we're gonna still need to get into. We're working on that.
Or maybe there needs to be a conversation with them.
We're working on that.
If I could, I think the bridge was assumed that because there was no plan for there to be sidewalks, and then beyond that it was going to be the bicycles for bike route 1. And I don't think there was specifically shoulder, sidewalk, stop all of that. There's development, there's little people coming to change that. But it's a different conversation.
Yep.
One thing that I would also say is that we're talking about the area that previously been used as overflow parking or ferry station. I believe that's privately owned. And it's been blocked off on both sides. It was no longer for parking. So if that was, I don't believe it's county. So I'm not sure if there's another area we would go to.
Yeah, so there's kind of two vacant areas. The area you just described, it is privately owned now, and so that would not be where we would be looking to expand if we did expand parking. It's actually just west of that, kind of up against the neighborhood. I'm not.
There's a landmark.
Yeah. So that would connect in with the existing rectangular lot.
Have you guys done any coordination as far as the smart scale project changes? I know that on the outside, you change the scope of a project, you change the benefits, but that can change the smart scale.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have.
We have not yet, just because we haven't made a final determination about if there are any changes, or if we're still going to pursue the capacity increase as we put it in the round 2 smart scale. So if there are changes, then we would have to with VPRA.
Thank you very much, Nick. So we'll go to the next presentation, 7B.
Yes.
the LRXP 2050 FY 25 modifications. Ms. Becky Golden.
Yes, Mr. Chair, what we have for your action today are the goals and objectives amendments for the disabled community. And, the chapter 5 changes, the TDM will hold off till, they have the full 2024 information available. So this is before you for recommended approval.
Are there any comments on the sections that FAMPO staff have presented?
These amendments come about directly as a result of letters we received from various organizations that deal with folks that have disabilities. They were quite upset that we didn't change the LRTP when they first sent their first letter. But of course, back then, you know, the public comment came right at the end of the process, and the goals were decided like a year before that. So to go back was messy. So we've tried to include proposals that could be used in future that we think we could work with. But we're happy to take comments from the floor, questions.
So are there any comments or questions from the committee?
I appreciate staff making these edits.
It's about making things more accessible to people who have difficulties. So that's what it's about.
Matthew.
And the ones who initially were unhappy with the original set of goals, they've seen this.
Yeah, we took Becky.
Yes, sir.
See.
Very good. Well, hearing no further comments, I'll ask for a motion to approve. Is
Motion for approval.
there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right, so that brings us to 7C, the TIP amendment and modification process policy. With Dr. John Rideout.
Thank you. This policy is essentially the same that you reviewed last month. We put it out and requested comments. We didn't receive any, so we're bringing it back in front of you for approval so we can start interacting with our state agencies within these guidelines.
So I guess I just had one question, like BDOT has reviewed these, that has no concerns of these changes?
BDOT was part of the panel that actually wrote the document.
Okay.
So I think they came to a thing here and we went through them. They gave input. We made changes
Right.
after their input. We brought it to this committee that BDOT is on as well, and now we bring it back here. So if there's any last one, we'll take it. But I think BDOT did come to a meeting and with our transit partners and the state farm, we workshopped it.
Very good. Yes.
Just a side comment, Sharon asked if she could go through it with you later.
Yes,
With all the
absolutely.
changes, make sure we do them correctly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I know I think that I had a minor comment on just the calendar for May. I think the GWC is on the same day. That was like on this item, like. over.
Yeah, I think the GWRC is pushed into the family meeting afterwards, but
So I think we need to highlight that as well then.
Yeah.
Chip is made aware of, because in May, ours is on the normal Monday. And then GWRC would start at 5 o'clock. So I pointed that out to them.
So GWRC has moved their meeting to the same day as ours. Is that what happened?
I don't know if it's a,
yeah, I don't know if it's done yet.
Chip is aware of the,
yeah,
this is our FAMPO calendar, and May 19th is the FAMPO date that will start at 6. And there's a holiday that falls on the GWRC date. And Chip is aware of that. So our calendar,
I think when we go back to the policy committee with this, we should alert them to that possibility before they approve the thing so that they're aware of what might happen.
I think that we can coordinate with Chip, but I think that the GWRC calendar would be adopted at November. So,
which is after
later this month.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
Bampa one will.
We're gonna make note of it, but until they adopt it, we can't say that their meeting's on our date yet. It's kind of a weird.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Chicken
not
egg.
official yet, but we can coordinate
The-
prior to the 2 meetings.
The feedback we got at the FAMPO policy committee meeting is that are not currently in favor of trying to have two meetings on the same night. I know 2 years ago it was the opposite. They really wanted to put them all on the same night. The tone of the comments we got is going in the other direction. We don't want them on the same night because we want to have proper discussion about the items. So I think we must, John, alert them to that potential change as well when we have the panel meeting.
And, Mr. Hollis, this is the calendar attached to the tip policy later on your agenda today.
Is the actual.
We have the actual calendar where we talk about the, January, February.
Correct. So this is just for the tip dates.
Well, I'll say very good job with staff, just working with just all the stakeholders on this. I don't have any further concerns. Does anyone on the committee have any other questions for staff? All right, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve. The motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Because our numbers are down today, everybody's talking too much.
Just for the record,
There's only 6 of you. So.
all in favor? Any opposed? Good. Motion carries. Just for the record, the chair cannot just initiate a motion.
That always happens when some of the more robust members can't be at the meeting, then everybody looks at everybody who's going to make the motion.
Oh,
We do have an in-person forum.
Yes, we do.
yes.
More than enough for a quorum, but 1 or 2 folks who talk a lot on perhaps the other day.
Okay, so this brings us to 7D, and basically, I just wanted to talk with, myself with other members of the committee about this. So what we're seeing is that costs for 2025 have risen quite a bit due just to the COVID era funding kind of ending. We're concerned about that, and I guess we wanted just to get perspectives on maybe what other localities are doing with this. This impacts basically Veery, PRTC, and Fred, FBX Go. I know like the Veery and PRTC, they come out of the regional gas tax, so there's like a funding source for that. Fred doesn't have that, so we're kind of beginning to work through the process for basically how to address this. I just wanted to hear from the city and staff for basically what your perspectives were on this as well as with transit.
I'll jump in. So have you heard what the PRTC number is going to be yet, the percent increase?
I think we have heard something. I don't know what it is, but I think across the board, everything's going up.
Okay, I know VRE, I generally know what that might be. Fredericksburg go about that number. I just didn't know what PRTC is. So we have a 5-year financial plan, and for that, we assume generally whatever's shown in the VRE in the past has shown 2.5%. So that's what we assume in our county 5-year plan for our transportation fund. For Fredericksburg Go, we had discussions with them, and we were aware that they were going to potentially significantly increase this year. So we assumed like, I think 510,000, and our subsidy this year is requested at 550. So generally we're okay on Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg Go and PRTC is such a small amount that'll be a minimal hit. It is though VRE, the potential significant increase, and still uncertain what the subsidy percentages are going to be. That could be a significant concern. So I don't know about VRE yet, but the other two I'm not too concerned about because it's just such a small number, or we've generally planned for it already. So
I guess, does the city have any comments?
The budget just started like a couple of weeks ago, and I asked Bailey if he has any additional information. Ms. Jackson, I think the best thing to ask. We just started the budget about 2 weeks ago.
So I guess the change in VRE, Paul, if I'm reading records, concerns.
Right. And we recognize the COVID money is sort of basically done, so it was going to go up. I guess I say just that money for transit can be sometimes kind of a harder sell, basically with our localities. So I apologize for this. So it can sometimes be a hard sell, and so we're trying to work through that. And I guess one of the questions that came to us is just regionally, is there anything we can do to try to get additional monies for transit to reduce the local share of the cost going forward. I'm not sure if there is something, but I guess I didn't know if anyone that's on the committee had some ideas for how to do that.
I think we still need to continue to work on that kind of holistic approach of everything that's on that map up there and tying transit into that. I mean, our transportation master plan is $1.6 billion of roadway projects. And that's just roadway projects. We don't get into how much transit. We don't get into how much you need for Fredericksburg Go. We haven't expanded service at all in the past few years for Fredericksburg Go. So if we were to start looking at that, what does that look like for us as well? That is a significant concern. The other thing with VRE is, what happens come 2030, 2032, and, you continue to get more and more service expansions, that number continues to go up and up and up and up. We obviously have to hope that ridership continues to increase, but it's still difficult to portray that to the board and to anyone, because you had, X number of riders per day, now you have so much less that cost per user is so much smaller than it was, and that's a hard number to see, especially when we've seen all of our project costs continue to go up and up and up. We are in a bit of a better position in terms of fuel tax because we did receive, I think, nearly $1 million more last year than we were projected, just because some gas stations opened, and that was quite helpful. We expect the same this year, but overall, that 5-year plan is not looking good for just funding through fuel tax.
I guess this is just a question for the transit agencies. Is most of the increase like on the operating side as opposed to the capital side? Like, is it easier to get money for capital versus operating?
In our experience, yes, just because, at least in VRE's position, we tend to be very competitive with grants that increase that are for projects that increase person throughput, mitigate for congestion. That tends to be our bread and butter, whereas a, transit agency like FXP Go might not check all those boxes with the congestion, right? I think the biggest revenue challenge for us is the operating revenue. So right now we, what is it, a year and a half ago, we were switched out of the DRPT merit program. And so now we receive 3.5% off the top of the MTF fund. That's not indexed to any expected increase in operating costs, whether planned or unplanned. And so, the buying power of that 3.5% diminishes over time. The other area that's going to be challenging for us is our CROC, our Commuter Rail Operating and Capital. That's a non-reverting dedicated fund, but it's only $15 million a year that we get from the Transportation Trust Fund. That is fully subscribed for the next 15 years, now 14 years, for both debt service for the Transforming Rail in Virginia program, as well as some PAYGO projects. So it's split up about $7.5 million to $7.5 million for both of those. So the debt service, that's going on until, 29 years from now. The PAYGO funds are committed for the next 15. So, and that is not indexed to inflation at all. So every year it's still $15 million, and that buying power reduces. The third sticky wicket for us is our pandemic relief funds, which we expect at the current rate of use to exhaust in fiscal year 20, so calendar year 2027. And that represents, according to this, 17% of our.
Yes.
So I don't mess with localities and how they cut up the pies and all that, but just if you look at it from a big picture, outside of an individual locality, obviously if more gas stations open in each locality, that has a little effect of lifting the total gas tax that comes in, which would give you a little extra. But that aside, let's go even further out and look at the very big picture. The federal gas tax that goes into the trust fund for transportation infrastructure. That gas tax has been at exactly the same level since I think 1993, if I'm correct. But nowhere in the world is the inflation zero. So we're taking the same gas tax, but inflation hasn't gone up. There's been no accommodation for inflation in that gas tax for all that time. Move on to 2024. we now have increased electric vehicles being purchased. And they're moving also now into the used second-hand vehicle market as new ones get purchased. And that actually doesn't help your gas tax either, because it's eating into the total number of gallons of gas that gets sold, right? So long term, we look out 20, 30 years, big picture is we're gonna have to replace the taxes we're getting from gas with other things as time goes on. And we haven't yet got that in place. The state of Virginia hasn't instituted this electric and other I forget the term, alternative fuels vehicle user fee. Because you're not buying gas, but you're still damaging the road surface, therefore you should pay something. So you pay this user fee, which is a once a year, I think it's like $1,000 per vehicle or something. None of that is coming back here. Whereas the portion of gas tax comes back here. None of that alternative fuels vehicle fee, unless I'm mistaken, but to my knowledge, none of that comes back here. So as the alternative fuel vehicles become a bigger percentage of the pie, the gas tax portion, what you collect from the vehicle vehicles on the road, is going to shrink. So the long-term effect is we're going to have to think about what we're going to do. Don't have to do it today or this year or this budget, but I would guess over time the gas tax income is going to erode, slowly erode, as inflation kicks in and as more electric vehicles hit the road, or a hydrogen vehicle or whatever else vehicle, you're going to erode it. So long term, politicians at federal, state, and local level need to start thinking about how are we going to offset those costs over time. It'll be a bit this year, it'll be a little bit over the next decade, and a lot over the following decade. We don't know, but probably an enormous amount 30 years from now will be revenue for the gas tax.
Matthew.
I guess kind of two things. One, the question is what happens if we don't pay VRE? Agree to it. I
don't think that's an option.
I don't think that's an option,
Well,
but
you don't pay for VRE that we don't stop it.
I figured.
I mean, but, and then your compatriots up north get pissed because
Right.
they're now having to take on the $2.5, $3 million that you pay a year.
Okay.
You know?
That was the answer I was expecting. Just wanted to make sure I was on the right page.
Running the trains doesn't significantly decrease when we don't stop it.
And that's the only
Yeah.
difference between that and Fredericksburg Go, whereas if we don't pay, buses just don't come, they don't come at all. With VRE, the trains still pass by, right? So can't get on.
Yeah.
Just a question. I knew the answer, I thought, but
So this is just a question, I guess, for VRE, and I'm not sure if this would help, but it's been a while since VRE has put in like for major like smart scale projects.
Mhm.
Is there something, regionally that kind of FAMPA could be doing, maybe with Northern Virginia to try to get some kind of infrastructure improvement that's for the next round of smart scale that we should start working on relatively soon?
I mean, like I said, our challenges in the next 10 years are gonna be primarily operating revenue, which, isn't really, the smart scales bailiwick. I would say the number one unmet need right now is rolling stock expansion. Yeah, we're probably going to we'll be in a period for the next, say, 7 to 10 years where we have enough rolling stock. But then if we continue to expand and if the peaks do come back in a more significant way, you're going to need to add locomotives to the fleet. We're going to need to replace our locomotives that we have because they have 20-year useful lives. So they're going to start coming to the end of their useful lives in 2030, 2031, 2032. So in pretty short order, even if we don't add a single train to the schedule, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of unmet capital needs just to keep the service running at a high level.
Is locomotive purchase eligible small scale item?
Well, the challenge that we faced is that it doesn't increase capacity.
Yeah.
So technically it would be considered state of good repair, and I don't believe that smart scale funds state of good repair projects.
But 5307 funding might.
I think there's rules for that. I mean, we've typically used 5337 funding for state of good repair for okay, the station needs to be painted or whatever. But I mean, like a locomotive, in 2030. A locomotive today, if you wanted to just buy one off the shelf, and it's not like there's a corner store where you can buy locomotives, it's like 10 million bucks, right? So add inflation up to whenever, and you're talking big money. So we're trying to figure out, in fact, we're doing some internal studies to look at what's the lowest level of infrastructure that we need, rolling stock we need to provide the most service. We're really biting our nails that in 2030, when now all of a sudden all this railroad capacity exists and we can start running more service, are we gonna have the fleet? Yes, and that's what we did for round two of Smart Scale. We got partial funding for the rail cars that are under procurement right now. And that's gonna be a huge help. Those 21 rail cars are gonna help plug the gap as we start to expand.
And please buy new rail cars that have got both high level platform and low level platform options. Where you can, like Amtrak, you can do a high level platform or a low level platform. Because if the plan is to go even into one station further north, gotta have high level platform ability.
Right now, that's not included in any of our plans. And unfortunately, it's like during COVID when you were trying to buy a car and it's like, well, we've got this car and we've got this car. Which one would you like? That's kind of what we have to deal with we're small potatoes. We bought 21 rail cars off of a 200 car order from Mexico. So you kind of have to take what's already in the market.
Available. And Amtrak, for example, been told at the new Bristol City station that's gonna connect to the airport. They are gonna come in and build a high level platform against the low level platform.
That's correct.
So even in Virginia, we're gonna start seeing 1 or 2 high level platforms. Just makes sense to try and get cars that are interoperable.
Yeah, I think the challenge that we face there, and again, we're not like opposed necessarily to moving towards an interoperable. Interoperable meaning high-low. The challenge is our rail cars still have a decent amount of useful life. So the earliest that we'd be replacing our Nippon Charios, which are the ones that you see running through here today, would be like 2037, the earliest, right? And then there's like a 7 or 8 year disposition timeline for that. So there will likely be a period where even if we go out next year and say we found a procurement, path forward, we're going to order these cars that are going to be able to, trapdoor, high, low, whatever. Even if we did that, you'd still be in an operating paradigm where until the mid 2040s, unless we decided as a matter of policy, we'd get rid of some of those cars early, because of the capital costs associated with that, you would still have a mixed fleet.
I'm noted.
So I know for our budget, I would agree, ours is mainly capital too, that we can get more funding for, but we still have a lot of costs for operations. I would say the majority of our budget does currently come from FDA and DRPT. The localities are providing about 6%. So it is a very small percent of our whole budget that is coming from the localities. I know it's large for the localities, but it is overall very.
That's 6% for the capital, 6% of it.
For the overall, for everything. And so if COVID had not happened, the budget we provided this year would have been about the steady budget. It would have been like right here. But because we had the COVID funding, we were able to reduce it for all the localities. So, I mean, this really, it was basically a discount that counties got for a few years.
So this resets back to
Pre-COVID, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would encourage the jurisdictions when they're looking at the cost to provide transit service, to refrain from trying to benchmark against what things cost, in 2017, 2018, 2019. I mean, just labor on the railroad side, things like host railroad operating agreements, diesel fuel, have gone up fairly considerably. Insurance is a big thing I don't think about. We have to insure our system, and you can't just go call up Allstate and get a policy. We have to actually send 2 people to Lloyd's of London, and meet with insurance brokers for a week and negotiate a policy. So there's some real expense, associated with that. So I would just costs have gone up. Ridership has not gone up to meet the costs. I think we're just in a kind of a new normal of what it costs to move one rider. I would also say, I mean, two other things, you know, in our current budget, the jurisdictional contribution is only 8 or 9% of the total, you know, piece of the funding pie. So we, you know, I think the jurisdictions get a tremendous value, you know, basically more than a 10-to-1 buy down of the service that they're receiving from the money that they are paying in. So just, I know that's an easy thing for us to all talk about here amongst technical people, but for a politician that maybe doesn't always, that argument doesn't apply, but just we continue to try to make that.
Matthew?
Another thing I'll say, there is, you know, Northern Virginia DPD roads is going on that running a lot of funding, but you know, Nick, you probably know more than me, but correct me if I'm wrong, that's also just related to regional transit funding in Virginia.
In Northern
So that includes Fairfax Connector, includes Arlington Regional Transit, Loudon Transit, all that stuff. So it includes VRE or a little bit. Right?
It does, yeah.
So that's another, I think that is, whatever leads to is the path forward future funding for transit. It's not Fredericksburg Go, but it is VRE. And that's where the, you know, $3 million or $500,000, it's VRE is more of a request to us than our bus services. So perhaps something we can work to get some more information on, see where it's at, and
Sure.
see how we want to.
I cannot see the state of Maryland, state of Virginia, and DC giving WMATA taxation authority, which means they're going to keep control of it in states, and each state is going to have to use their total system to see how they're going to raise funds, their portion of WMATA. WMATA wants a taxing authority. They want an RTA, basically. I think they're going to be told no by this process. I can't see them.
And for our region, we do have a tax for transit. That's our gas tax. That's what it's supposed to go the way. So, you know, if we get into that discussion about, you know, you have taxing authority for transit or you need more money, their answer is, well, you have your gas tax.
It's actually called commuter rail tax.
So the answer to the discussion maybe, you know, is not, we need more money for transit, we need more money for capital projects, like roads, so that our gas tax can continue to go towards what it's meant to be, transit and operations for our transportation.
Well, and a healthy funding paradigm includes more than just one source. I mean, you've given presentations to this group that looks at what would happen if the sales tax, you know, was increased by this, or the, you know, transit occupancy tax. I mean, look to, you know, the NVTC jurisdictions, because they have a much broader menu of taxes with which to get a little money here, a little money there. And then, you know, from a political perspective, it doesn't seem like you're putting all your eggs in one basket and burdening one sector economy over the other.
And that's also where our next presentation, I guess, will go, is a cohesive approach to knowing how much money is really helpful. Our transportation fund has gas tax, it has property tax, I guess. But what else does it have that have CMAQ SCBD? They know we get X amount per year in the future. That'll certainly be something really helpful to planning our future decisions.
So I had a couple more quick questions. The I-395 commuter choice funding, is that useful to the VRE to get money for capital?
It is very useful. Yeah, we've used it. We've been successful in fully funding our Crystal City station expansion. We've got money for step up to reinstate step up that allows VRE customers to ride Amtrak trains with a ticket. That should be reinstated in the new year if all goes as planned. And just generally any other thing where you can clearly show a person throughput and benefit to the toll payers on 95, 395 and also 66. That's really the key. It has to show a measurable benefit to the toll payers, because the Virginia law set the commuter choice program up with that benefit. So things where, you know, yeah, we need to replace some locomotives. I mean, no capacity, you know, increase associated with that. So
Is VRE putting in for basically this round of commuter choice for 95?
we're still kind of talking about that internally. There were a couple projects. I mean, we're kind of running out of projects that aren't either taken care of by other sources or that have a clear line to, you know, capacity increase. But there are a few that we've put on the short list. we still need it. I actually need to have a discussion later this week about it.
There's the other big element in the room, Chair, and that
Yes.
is the election tomorrow.
Right.
We don't know this direction or that direction, and one of those people is gonna develop an administration that will either increase transportation funding or reduce transportation funding, and either candidate could do either of those things. We have no idea. I think there's gonna be significant change in the new administration, whoever that is.
And unfortunately, our funds, most of our capital funds are already secured. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, but I think the rolling stock piece is gonna continue to be the biggest unmet need here in the next several years. And there's just not the level of, I mean, we tend to look towards the discretionary, the federal discretionary or the state discretionary programs for capital because you can go out and get $100 million in one award, you know, a big rolling stock FTA grant or a core capacity grant or something like that.
Let us
So-
know if you need a letter of support. I'll personally make sure you get
I
one.
just wanted to ask Kate, like, what's the latest with the 5307?
Yeah, so we have had a meeting with PRTC. They have made a proposal, so just for background for everybody. This is funding that's generated through the Vanpool Alliance program that GW Ride Connect participates in. We had allocated funding to Fred way back in 2020. We are just now getting that funding out to them. So we've been working on a major backlog, detangling some issues. So we've had a meeting with PRTC to kind of talk about how do we fix the backlog, have a better plan moving forward. So that's happened. They've made a proposal to us that we need to work through. Like I said, we've been working with Fred and PRTC to get the funding that was allocated many years ago out. We do have some VRE projects that have been allocated funding, so my next step is to follow up with you all and, you know, does the timeline align for this funding to work with the recommendation? Or do we need to make an adjustment there? And then once kind of all those pieces are fixed, we can then start talking about, you know, what's the plan for future funding. So I actually have a meeting scheduled with Chip for this week to kind of go through all of those things and talk about like what's our plan and what's our timeline to essentially do a call for projects. And really the only eligible applicants would be VRE, PRTC, and FXPGO. So do a call for projects and kind of figure out how to award. And I think, you know, with this being a factor, like how could this funding help offset local costs, right? This is a decision made by the Achievers Board. The 5307 funding is only for capital. So kind of back to what we've been talking about, it's not necessarily going to solve the operating issue. It can maybe help offset some of the capital side, which depending on how the budget is structured, might help on the operating side, but that would really be a question for your transit agencies.
Is there still money for preventative maintenance that can help a little bit on the operating side?
We can fund preventive maintenance.
The technology you can fund.
Yes.
So if there's new technology you need for your trains or your buses, whatever, you can fund that. That's funded and infrastructure. But the TMAC, I know you believe this strongly, and I actually agree that if the next round can replace the CMAC that we have on the other station in Stafford, that CMAC we can get back into the pot here, which can go to localities. All these things are sort of connected, but not. So for example, GWRC's GW Ride Connect program may not get in 5307 money, even though they are the program that generates the money. They are not allowed to use it. So we, from our CMAC, give them an allocation, a small allocation of 50,000 or something that kicks in 2 years' time or something. On CMAC, they're bringing millions per cycle back into the region. There's a backlog, of course,
right,
but they're not allowed to get a cent of that money. So if their computer breaks, they can't replace it because DRPG won't pay for it. But that's why we give them that out of our CMAC so they can replace their computers. But they're generating those millions. I don't know how much it is a year, but it's
About $1 million.
it's about $1 million a year that they give to us to allocate to infrastructure, technology, etc.
I just want to say that nothing that I've said this, I'm not criticizing. For Rodney and myself, I think at a staff level, we have a tough sell.
Yes.
We're just trying to get basically kind of input from the group to try to better address it. We're supportive of Fred and TC and trying to find a solution. So don't take away like anything that I've said today that we're critical. We're not. We're just trying to see what the options are.
One thing that might help you is that there are members from the supervisor boards of each of our localities that sit on the VRE boards. Just a little piece of that they might already be aware of, because they were there when the vote was taken on the budget, presumably, right? And did you approve your new budget?
You mean the fiscal year 25 budget?
No, but
The one with the extra increase in operating costs.
it's not been taken yet.
No, they say that doesn't happen over the December meeting, then it gets by the commissions again.
Maybe delay your
Might wanna-
conversation till January when they have personally
Yeah.
already voted for the budget, then you can come back and say, the budget you voted for includes this element. We need to find the money locally.
Good. Well, thank you very much. So we can move on to the next item, which is 7E, the CMAC STG new policy update with Dr. John Rideout and Mr.
Thanks, Chair. What we're trying to do is find a new system, right? And some people want us to move quicker. We don't want to move too quickly because to change the system, we have to get buy-in. We have to get a level of consensus. And it has to look generally fair to everybody. And we don't want to rush it. So what we want to do is show you now, get your input. The chair talked about a possibility maybe of having another meeting in December to discuss it again. Whether we do or whether we don't, we're okay with that. We just try to present options and suggestions, take your feedback, work on it again to try and get to a position where everybody feels reasonably happy with the alternative. They say that the best negotiated settlement is when everybody feels just a little bit unhappy. So I don't know where that sweet spot is, but we're going to try and find it. So John has been working for quite some time, and this is an update of where we are now.
Well, we can rush and get consensus real quickly. And just give me the money, right? And I'll go with the TV. I'll take folks along with me if y'all want to. Okay. So do I have any movement there?
Not sticky.
All right, Plan B, of course, it's still a work in progress. Kind of the goal here is to provide jurisdictions a lot of flexibility in how they approach and build off of things that are kind of evergreen in data sources as well, so that we're not going to be looking or scrambling in 2 years when one piece of data that was critical to the formula is suddenly missing. So we are kind of following along with NBTA's kind of high level approach. Now, if you get into the weeds of that, you realize there are no weeds. It's kind of a little bit of a black box. And of course, there is a little bit of discrepancy there because we're an NPO and like they are not. But I always like to come up with is that they do have a process. They do have off the top items. They do have a formula that is generally based on population. But I like number 7. But this is a great, huge nebulous thing of building consensus because kind of we have to get to that before they kind of leave that towards the end. So that is their process. We've kind of also looked at Richmond and Hampton Roads a little bit too.
Before you move off the slide, that point 4 is one of the 2 changes that we're trying to work on. Use the population formula to allocate the rest of the available CMAC and RSTB funds. We think population plus something would be a better formula, but that's the point. They give the formula, allocate the money, and then say to the jurisdictions, you decide. So if you want to spend all of it on transit, that's fine. If you want to spend all of it on roadways and next year spend it on transit, we're not going to dictate to the localities. The only thing we have to dictate is that CMAC has to be spent on the CMAC eligible projects, and STBG money has to be spent on eligible STGB funding. And we will be the gatekeeper on that particular element in the future, even if we have a new model. We will check that this project is actually eligible, but we won't tell you which project to spend it on. That's the change.
So if we look at how our current distribution, including our set aside fund, it's kind of important to note that only a small percentage kind of goes outside the jurisdictions. However, with like the Stafford TMA, you see about 12.6% of the potential pot goes there. They haven't made use of that, so it's elsewhere. Carbon reduction is about 4% of the pot, but you also have something that often eats in. So right now, potential cost increases can actually nibble into the potential pot, often a lot more than some folks are projecting, at least when we do for our calls for projects. But you see normally between about 16 or 70 and 80% usually goes back to the jurisdiction directly through the competitive process. Again, this is just how that's panned out. If you take all years of CMAQ STBG, you have the pie chart on the left. But if you look at the right two, the last call for projects generally have distributed very unequally between the jurisdictions. It's either feast or famine, and we know that jurisdictional need doesn't necessarily follow that you could actually have more need in one year that you're less competitive, or less need in another year, but you're more competitive. So there's a big swing in the years depending on what's available. In fact, the pot can change year to year. So some years can be a very small pot, other years can be a very large pot. And just focusing on the previous methodology, or I should say the current new methodology, we've been doing this for 3 rounds. And the distribution is as followed. So you'll see that depending on the year and the need, in FY23, there's 4.3 million, but in the FY28-29, it's just under 12 million. So you actually have close to a $2 million difference there. As well as in FY30, just 1 year is literally double the pot of FY27. So it's becoming a kind of a roller coaster depending on the money that's available and kind of the distribution of it. If you want to see the exact same thing, if you don't like pies, you can have bar charts as well. You can just see how the distribution changed between those years. So approaching a new methodology, one we have to kind of do this is that it's kind of a chicken and egg with the highway. We want to kind of give them something that works for us, but they won't necessarily give that and say if it works for them. So we kind of have to create a reptile first to see if it's okay, because we don't want to invest a lot of time that they're not okay with. And at the same point in time, we don't want something they're okay with that doesn't work for us. So we're still working with that. I'm going to set the set aside for now. It's a small percentage. I'm going to loop back again. And my approach is going to be looking at composite ranges. I'm not going to say that one jurisdiction definitely gets 20%, one definitely gets 30%, and the next jurisdiction gets this amount of percent. I'm going to actually give you a range so that the magic number probably should fall within a kind of an idea. I'm going to kind of go through slightly more complex, commonly more complex approaches, and then I have a very simple one at the end, and I'm trying to maintain mode neutrality through this for right now. So one of the first concepts that we developed, and this was kind of building off in BTAs, is a population based metric. We actually threw in employment as well because it does change very significantly between the jurisdictions. So for this one, we kind of looked at, let's take the percentage of the regional population, your population of the jurisdiction divided by the regional population, the urbanized population divided by things, we're kind of weighting population here, and then employment divided by the regional employment to see what kind of market shares each one of the jurisdiction has. And the result kind of fell in this with Stafford getting 47% of that, Spotsylvania with 39, and the city at 14. So that was the simple one. Moving on to the more complex one, we started looking at different transportation networks. So we looked at daily vehicle miles traveled, facility miles, daily vehicle miles traveled per mile within the jurisdiction, population per facility mile. We actually went through a lot of metrics to kind of say, okay, what's going to kind of generate things? And we saw that things were very wide. Daily vehicle miles traveled actually meshed with urbanized population very closely. They're within 1% of each other there. Facility miles, was basically more dependent on the land area of the jurisdiction. So Spotsylvania actually had the most facility miles in their area, but Fredericksburg had a lot less, particularly compared to their population. And so forth. So we kind of created a formula that looked at, all right, let's keep it very complexly simple. Look at the daily vehicle miles per BMT per mile of roadway in the facility, and then say, let's multiply that by the population. So we're getting a composite there. And the result of that is this large pie. You think kind of some of the variables leading into it are very different from each other. But we're getting another thing where Fredericksburg's landing in the teens, Spotsylvania's in the mid-40s, and I'm sorry, Stafford's in the mid-40s, and Spotsylvania's in the high 30s for this composite. Now, we started to say, okay, what other information? Well, we also have trip activity and distribution composites. So we're looking at, okay, what trips are folks taking and kind of generally to what locations? So we broke it up into 3 main categories here. Jobs, basically saying, okay, we know where we have employment, and we know how many trips as a national average are feeding into that. We know some retail data from the various jurisdictions. So where are people going to shop? Because jobs and shopping are actually 2 different distributions within our area. And finally, the non-work, non-retail trips. We're kind of basing this off of population, that these trips are generated from that. And so we started coding those based on where we think that those trips and locations are taking in a general sense. So here's the coding. So we have jobs and employment. So things from like work from home for a paid trip, work from a non-home location, volunteer activities, changing types of transfers. So this is your multimodal if you're going to a parking lot, jobs and employment. These 4 here to buy meals, shopping, family, personal errands, and exercise. We threw into retail and commercial type activities. Then everything else was based on population. So we took that and then we looked at the jurisdiction, say, where's this weight taking place? So for population, the 9% Fredericksburg, 43% in Spotsylvania, and 48% in Stafford. Okay, we're gonna weight those trips that were the non-work trips, non-retail trips based on that. Then we looked at the jobs. Fredericksburg has a lot higher employment compared to its population region. So we weighted their jobs weight a little bit higher. And then we looked at the retail activity, which is actually Spotsylvania's highest weight compared to the region, is that they actually generate a lot more of the retail trips. So we basically multiplied the jurisdiction's market share for either population-based trips, employment trips, and this versus that trip type. So 56 times 9, 5%. 21 times 23 is about 5%, and we worked it away. So we're kind of weighting each trip with the trip choices for each one of the jurisdiction. The magical number that kind of got split out from the composite was about 15% for Fredericksburg, 41% for Spotsylvania, and 44% for Stafford. So through all these different metrics, we're kind of seeing this trend. Again, it's getting back to the magical range, where typically you saw Fredericksburg basically in the low to mid-teens in most cases. You had Spotsylvania between about 37 and 43%, about 40%, and Fredericksburg is in that mid to high 45, 40, 50 range. Yes.
Before you leave this slide, because we're going through lots of data really quick. So if you look at the vertical columns, each one of those is a method of calculating the split, and each one is different. And of course, that's how you get to a range of different options on the right-hand side. Now, at the end of this process, we can either pick one of these, say that's the one we think is the most fair, and we do that. Or, as John's going to show you in a little while, he's come up with a straight formula that replicates something in those ranges, right? So there's multiple options that you can use to do this. He's going to get to the TMA now, but do you see there's options to choose from? We are going to try to, Mr. Chair, meet with, online with, Federal Highways to ask them whether any of these options is a no-no from their point of view, right? So we don't know. They said to us, yes, proceed with your process, but we want to see what formulas you use before we say yes to the formula. So what we really need to do is go back to them and say, here's 5. Are some of these not okay with you? So that before we meet with you again, I want to meet with Steve Miner and whoever else he wants on the call to say, okay, these are options. Can you cross out the ones that you would veto so that we don't get everybody excited about one and then they say later, no. We'd rather have the no early so we can exclude anything that they don't like. Because they may not like, for example, DMV, and they say, no, you can't do that. So these are not yet vetted by Federal Highways.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Last time we brought this up, there was an option that included the burden that each jurisdiction carries by transportation through their jurisdiction.
Yes,
Which one is that?
that is this.
Okay,
Daily vehicle miles travel, per facility mile. That is ultimately what it's getting in. But we readjusted it using population, mostly because you would result in a table like this. And that's where we're looking at a lot of the transportation.
what's wrong with that too?
Well, you give 52% of the money to Fredericksburg City.
Oh, I see.
That's what's wrong.
Be generated per citizen, that would be a lot.
I mean, we love
Yeah.
Fredericksburg dearly, but.
No, I get-
52% of the money, sorry.
Yeah,
But the same way is if I just take the road miles.
it's the inverse problem, yeah.
Problem, so we're trying to like, what is a mechanism to balance it? And we felt like this is actually balanced with population, as in, okay, per citizen, per burden, what would be the best kind of distribution point to that. So it's taking into account that do have larger jurisdictions and more citizens, balancing that out also with the traffic congestion.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think to my comment I made on this process before, that I would caution against picking something that's, that reinforces existing patterns of development or patterns of transportation investment, rather than, I mean, because CMAQ and STBG is really designed to provide an alternative source of funding for non-traditional, transportation that has a nexus to air quality and congestion.
You are right, but think about it practically. That would mean that a jurisdiction would actively increase their congestion so that they can get a little bit more CMAQ money. It would never happen. Nobody's going to actively increase their congestion to get just a small amount of money. It will never happen.
I guess what my point in that comment is to really caution against choosing an option that allows existing patterns of growth that might continue to put strain on regional roadway facilities, and allows them, because you're continuing to qualify because that.
So actually, this one kind of nerfs the idea that you're just going to build more capacity, because
Right.
if you start building facility miles, it's going to
It
rise
reduces,
in that.
well, and that's why I'm saying, I think that one, that's why I asked the question, which one contains the vehicle miles per facility mile? And I guess averaging it or, normalizing it by population is a way so that you don't skew the pie towards one jurisdiction. But
So I would like Dr. Rideout to be able to complete
Yeah,
the presentation right before we do any more questions.
yeah,
That's okay.
So how many slices of the pie? So you set asides aside for a bit, we can simplify it. When you have to throw the set asides back in, it can kind of get a bit complex, because we do have standing agreements with the TMA, and even within our set asides, we have some location prohibited usage, particularly through transit, that Stafford cannot give Fred money to buy new buses and say only serve Stafford folks. It has to be kind of regional. So we're aware of this, but if you want to run through this is things building into the form. What I kind of kept seeing through the data and just constantly saying, okay, here's a metric, crunch it, here's a metric, crunch it, is that we're slowly getting into this weird 3-3-1 cadence. Basically what we were saying is that if you take Stafford and Spotsylvania have a big one, a big, they're going to roughly equal each other in a lot of cases. And then Fredericksburg was always at this 1/7 of a ratio. And it actually fell in line with the TMA. Because if you take the TMA as its own large jurisdiction, because in some ways it is, it can also feed into a 3-3-3-1 with that 27% funding.
But only for STGB, not for.
Only STBG. So, and then we're also like, okay, we have this weird little thing, carbon reduction, it's not a lot of money. I honestly hate splitting it 8 different ways across multiple modes because it's kind of a headache and a burden. It's like, well, here's $10,000 of restricted funding, hopefully you can find a way to use it, and it is really wonky. So it's like, let's just set that aside for the regional, you can't spend it anywhere else funding because that works very, very well for that. And then we also have 5% set asides for smart scale and studies. We had a little bit of extra funding that didn't really fit. That was a topic that the TAC has previously discussed. So I came up with this. One with a 3-3-1 applied to CMAQ, you would actually have Stafford and Spotsylvania receiving 42% of the funds, with Fredericksburg receiving 14%. You do have a 2% set aside for GWRC Ride Connect. And the carbon reduction would go to Fredericksburg Go for their general kind of non-location specific funding requests. We tend to have these every year. It's the vehicle replacement transit amenities. And say you're getting that until it runs out. If it's not renewed, they'll just back 4% or 240,000-ish, depending, which has come out of the CMAQ as a set aside. For STBG, we kind of split it up again with the 3-3-3-1 formula. And this is really coming out as saying, we are keeping the TMA set aside agreement in place for this. Otherwise, it would look like this. But with that agreement in place, 30% of STBG really works out after set asides to be 27. And that was basically the magic formula that I could use to say, okay, Stafford non TMA specific, Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg could keep that 3-3-1 ratio while also accommodating currently the Tampa set aside. And then I had this 5% kind of left over rather than creating a weird little 3-3-3-1 division of that. Said, let's just go ahead and use that for smart scale support since that was an item. It's likely not enough for that, but it could help just to assist on some small levels.
Now, John, just pause for a second. Whatever percentages you finally settle on as a region, and really we as staff don't have a say, we just give you options, right? But whatever you settle on, those amounts for the jurisdictions, you can still spend some of that on transit. So if Nick comes knocking on the door of Stafford County and says, hey, we need money for a station upgrade, provided it meets the criteria of CMAQ, you can take it out of that money. Or you can spend it on Garrisonville Road because you need more money for Garrisonville. It's not, so there's no discussion here about what mode you spend on what money, except for that one amount for FXB Go. And I guess John is saying, if I get it wrong, John, just throw something at me. But I guess what John's saying is, because we tend to every year have a small amount that we send to Fred for things like new rolling stock or some infrastructure item, why don't we just acknowledge that that's what we're doing and put it in there? That does not mean that, for example, they can't get any of this Stafford TMA money, because that has traditionally been set aside for transit or bike ped, right? It just means that John is saying, we've got this funding amount, which we never know what to do with. And Fred gets a regular amount anyway. But the question is not answering for you, which would be a suggestion, I think, is that you make that a percentage, not a dollar amount, so that if carbon reduction goes away and we get HIP funding again, which, you never predict those. It all depends on which administration controls Congress. The CR might go away and we might get HIP funding, or that we might get both, we might, whatever. I suggest that it just, if you go for that route, you just have it as a percentage, not as a dollar amount, and not as carbon reduction specifically. continue to send the carbon reduction money. But if that gets taken away and we get HIP money, we can't use the HIP money for Fred, so we will just stick it at the same percentage. That's just one way of doing it. These are all options. Anyway, carry on, sorry.
Yeah, that was just, rather than using a formula, it's still a formula, it's just a 3-3-1 or a 3-3-3-1 formula in distribution to jurisdictions. So that's how it would break out. And really, the difference, the big difference from the total pot is that it's keeping that TMA agreement in place. So still up for further discussion. I crunched a lot of different numbers to create composites to get an idea. I saw this weird little cadence starting to happen. Data, numbers just start falling and start you play connect the dots and finding unicorns. That's where the last one was. So I'll leave it with you.
So at the end of this, Mr. Chair, if the folks here could tell us if there's an additional option that they would like us to give numbers on, then we can go and add that. But we don't know what other options you might want to look at.
So what I would like to do, I would like to wrap up this discussion about 11:30 today, just because we have some other things on the agenda. Get out too late, but I realize like there's been a lot of good information that the FAMPA staff have given. I was wondering maybe if there could be requests just for all the members to get back to FAMPA staff within the next week or so on this. And in particular, basically, if there's anything that any member wants the FAMPA staff to look at, maybe which isn't on here, get Federal Highway.
Yep.
You have the list, or maybe against that's indicated as well. I know there's just a lot to unpack, and there's not time for big discussion today, but I did want to kind of maybe discuss this for about 10 minutes. And also that I do think we need a special meeting on this in December. The reason just this is a big topic. I've had some passionate debates about this in the past. If we're just talking about this like every other month for 10 or 20 minutes, we're never going to get through this. I think if we had a work session just on this, maybe at the my proposal would be the December TAC date, since that's when FAMPA normally meets. We just focus on this. Maybe we could come up with a solution, and then FAMPA could work with Federal Highway and try to get a resolution maybe in the next few months. But with that, I'll just stop and take.
Yeah, I'll just
Matthew.
throw one comment out there. I don't think we need to include studies as if you go back 2 slides. Those put that back into the jurisdictions or transit and just let it be for the jurisdictions to decide.
But we can do that. The trouble with that is once we've allocated money to a jurisdiction, nobody wants to put money back into a central study. So for example, Spotsy's asked us to start looking at a study for an additional river crossing at New Post. Now, initially, we're just using staff resources to do it internally. But if you want to actually take it forward, you're going to have to get a consultant to do additional work that we don't have engineers here, etc. Right? So now that project crosses jurisdictional boundaries. It's partly in staff, but it's partly in Spotsy. So it's really hard to go back to the jurisdiction and say that money that we gave you, you need to give some back to the central pot to pay for a study. So yes, we can cancel the study, but just remember then, when the fight starts about giving money back for a study that you now program for Garrisonville Road, you're going to have to talk to your politicians about giving it back to a study, and I'm going to guess that they're not going to want to do that.
So how much is 5%?
It's about $125.
I mean, you need to build that up to do a river crossing study.
Yeah, but you can do it over 3 years. And
Yeah.
if you don't have a study, like apart from this request from Spotsy, we don't currently have a new study that we're planning on doing for a while, so the money can mount
And
up.
what I would say to that is the study was requested by Spotsy, and if it's supported by Stafford, then that's what Spotsy could figure out. No disagreement. I understand that's exactly where it'll go. I agree. If the jurisdictions want to do it.
I fully accept, and if you all want to vote for that, then that's your decision. I'm just
Trying to
saying
simplify
that
and
human behavior kicks in, and then nobody wants to give their 200,000 to pay for a study because they want their sidewalk.
then
Play devil's advocate, I mean, 125,000 really is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things to split between the 3 localities.
we are a regional body, so I think there's benefit in having a carve out for regional studies. And to Ian's point, not have to have a fight every time we have to come up with $100,000 for a small study. Or to compile it over several years. So it might save us a lot of things.
Just gonna be trouble deciding on what to spend.
Every 2 years, we have to come back and find new information, something for a small scale application, or some other small like need where you just have to throw $50,000. So that's kind of mentality, and I was building off this set aside for small scale development.
I have given up,
After you.
I have given up fighting for a particular outcome on this particular issue. There are two things that I would like. For Bambo staff not to have to be the person who decides who to give the money to every single year, because then we get grouched at. And secondly, that we have a fair system. So if it's a fair system, and we don't have to every year give the money to one project and not the other project, I'll be happy. So follow it up however you want. We're just throwing ideas for you to consider as options.
I generally support the idea that, you know, if a transit agency like us wanted to do a project within a jurisdiction, that it's a conversation between the jurisdiction. Okay, maybe allocate, select one of your projects to be our project, right? My only concern with that approach is that if VRE is trying to undertake in the future a project that spans jurisdictions, and let's say we have great support and a collaborative relationship with one of the jurisdictions, but not with the other two. You have a situation where, absent some type of transit carve out or some type of dedicated source for transit, you can have a situation where you just can't deliver the project with that funding because we might be able, Matthew and I might be able to sit down and say, yeah, we think that this is the project that needs to be submitted. It's got great scope. Then I come and talk to Fredericksburg, I come and talk to you, Paul, and it's like, no, we can't support that. We got other priorities. But it's a project of regional significance. So I think, just think about it. I mean, because we, only have so many dogs in this fight, but like, think about how the truly regional transit projects get handled in this methodology.
I mean, frankly, there's no secret. Part of the problem with that type of project is that it fluctuates.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to know how you can put that in a system when it fluctuates so wildly. If it was $100,000 every year, we can program it.
Right.
It's easy. Right. But when it's like $500,000 this year and $0 next year, and then $1 million the following year, very hard to predict that, which is why we first give it to the jurisdictions. And that 1 year when you need it, they've got the understanding, the documentation that this money is not for roadways, it's for all modes. And when they get asked for a match, because it's often that one locality is hit for the match on an infrastructure project. Operating expense is different, but on an infrastructure project, it's usually an individual locality that gets asked for the match, not every.
So perhaps a way to mitigate for that is designate some meeting, in advance of the general call for projects from the jurisdictions where you invite the transit agencies to specify the projects that they think that they're going to want to come in for, so that all of the jurisdictions can hear before they've had a chance to finalize, have individual discussions internally on which projects to promote. That way, we can hash out any of those because, yeah, you're right. I mean, VRE, we haven't come in for projects in a while. Let's say two rounds from now, we come in and we're like, hey, there's something of regional significance. We need 80% of the funding, we think. That's a big discussion. We're going to, if I went to you, you might be, yeah, sure, I'll give you 80% of my money, but Paul, you might say, no, we've got other priorities. So I think having letting the transit agencies get out and state their need, initially.
Upfront.
So it's not a true carve out or set aside, but it's kind of a de facto carve out. I mean, you can still say, no, we're not going to give it to you, but I mean, I would hope the purpose of this body is to foster regional collaboration and coordination. So, and I feel like that's exhibit A for how that could work well.
I'm open to that. I have a strong feeling in how the jurisdictions feel. We'll code in whatever you all think is a good idea.
So I did have one comment just on the money for basically FPXCO. So I'm supportive of giving some kind of carve out for Fred. I guess the question is with the CR money, basically, is that as flexible as the CMAC? So would that be the best money?
Slightly more restricted than CMAC.
It's the most restrictive of all of options.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be better than to give them CMAC. The other thing is with the CR, basically, the question is maybe with the next infrastructure bill, maybe that goes away. If that goes away, then that carve out would go down to zero. So I don't know if it's better to kind of think of the CR and CMAC together. It's kind of one pot and just to somehow do the percentage based on that.
So with this one, it assumes that if the CR disappears, then the same equivalent money would come out of CMAC with as a set aside. So basically it's saying this is a small pot funds that's hard to find out multiple ways. Let's give it to a entity that can basically isn't restricted on its use, and therefore keep the CMAC funds that are less restricted kind of back out to fall, and therefore proceed like that. But if it changes, then we have a small, it's equivalent to about 4% of our total pot now, coming out of CMAC. So it's okay, we can use that to backfill if it goes away, but if it's there, then let's use it there.
I take your point. It's kind of turning that dollar amount into a percentage and then just putting it in as a percentage. It's the same thing. It's fun, easy to do.
So I want to close the discussion today, but I did want to talk about just a special meeting. Basically, if we made basically a TAC meeting date in December, would that work for most members?
Let's just check what the date is.
December 2nd?
Yeah, December 2nd.
And it's only to talk about this particular stuff.
I don't know if anyone, well, I guess that's in the afternoon. There's a NOVA joint transportation meeting that evening.
Yeah, we don't have a FAMPA meeting on that day currently.
Not an issue for myself, Paul.
Yeah.
If there's somebody from the city who would.
Jamie and I should be available.
Sure, somebody would be available.
This would be a virtual or an in-person? Because I guess we're not voting on it.
Well, so it's a work session, so I guess we could do like hybrid.
Happy
What
to
we
do
do-
that, whatever you like. I think Paul suggested it to
Yeah.
try to build some consensus around which options are definite no-nos, then we can strike them off. And which are like the last two that we think are worth considering kind of meeting. Right? It's like get rid of ones that we're just never gonna get agreement on and focus on the one or two where we might actually get some.
Gee, I think it would be better to be in person if we could. Certainly if someone, just could be virtual, that's okay as well.
You're talking about $6 million a year. That's the amount of money you're talking about. It's not a big pot of money, but it is seed money you can use as match for your other programs. And it would be, so does anybody disagree with the idea that I'm trying to work on, which I've stolen from Northern Virginia, which is to say, let's try and get a formula so we don't have to fight and argue every year. You know that you will get always 38% of the money, right? That's the goal. Is anybody opposed to that idea? Okay, well then at least we have a goal to get to. I don't know how we'll get there, but I think this meeting is.
And I guess like if we were to get this staff comments within a week, that could be time to get federal highway, get feedback, maybe if any of the formulas just be cause them concern.
Yes, I've asked Steve for a meeting. He hasn't come back with anything yet, but I do want to get to him before the December meeting because he might say one of those is a definite no. So and what you mainly need to tell us before the next meeting is if you've got an additional option, we have not modeled for you. So if you've thought of a way to do this that has got this extra option, give us that extra option. John can prepare some pie charts and things to show you what it looks like, and then we can show that also to different ways.
I already have the data too. There's more going on.
Yes.
Other items, I would like to see some schedule of getting some sort of approval for anything. whatever that looks like. Are we looking for a year? Are we looking for 3 months, 6 months? Just some sort of discussion. We don't need to talk about it now, but just.
Yeah, so the idea, I think, is to just, in the first 6 months of next year, take something to the policy committee that they can approve. That's what I'm aiming for. Don't know if anybody has any special.
Yeah.
reason to-
Yeah.
Realistically, it would be, the deadline would be prior to the September TAC 2025, because at that point in time,
That's when we're.
projects happening and we roll forward with members that currently not.
And that will end up with 2 years worth of money, $12 million. But we could do it sooner if there's a pressing need on to delay it. So I just don't want to stress anyone by saying now, because we have time.
We can talk about the schedule in December. So, we'll close this discussion and move on to the staff reports. The first item is the 2024 public involvement activities.
All right, so this is the public involvement report that we have from January 2024 to October 2024. Ambiguously, kind of, sort of. What do I mean by ambiguously? I mean that there's a new sheriff in town, and it's me. So from January to June, Cully was here, and then there was a dark age where there was no public involvement coordinator. And then I started in July, therefore, the public involvement coordinator was not here for about 7 months. So the information that we have is accurate. So we're going to show events that we have done this year, but not all of the events that we've done this year. Because so we've done over 13 events this year. Since August, we have reached over 160 people at these events. These are a few of the events that we have attended last year. We have received 500 bags, 72 mugs, 72 misprinted mugs, and 100 keychains and swag. The operative word is misprinted here. We have 72 of them. That's a lot, and we need to push them out. So we have about 15 or so on the table in the front. If you guys want them, go ahead and take them. We have so many. Looking at our social media, we have a pretty decent number of followings on our Facebook, our Twitter, as well as our Instagram. Here are a few posts that we have made. We have received 26 comments at our meetings. At the previous first river crossing meeting on 20th, we received over 50 submitted comments. Looking at our mailing list, we have 1,395 subscribers on our mailing list right now. We've added 164 people. Out of the 80 that have been added since August 2024, 48 of those people signed up in person. So these events are really crucial to getting more people to be aware of what FAMPO does. And it's such a wonderful year. Some of our videos as well.
And Eugene has got some nice coffee mugs for you. If you didn't take one last time, please help yourself. There's a free coffee mug with a little FAMPO logo on and stuff that you can take home. Thanks, Eugene. It's rough when you have to report on your predecessor's work and your own work in the same meeting.
So the next item is just the upcoming river crossing meeting. John Rideout?
Interest of time, go.
Okay. So will that be like an open house?
Yes.
5 at a time?
It'll be an open house format over the course of 2 hours at the Credit Union Baseball Stadium for the next play. And it'll be in their main chamber artist in there. Just walk in, walk open space.
Plan, I believe, is to give people like 5 different ways to submit comments, like in person on the day you can talk to the consultant. You can put a dot on the map and write your complaint or comment. You can fill in a full sheet with all your detailed comments. You can email in comments. You can take part in a survey. And the key thing is that the consultant is there to answer your questions. So you can actually say, no, I don't understand that, or I don't like that, or I don't like that. What about the whole, et cetera? I'm gonna tell you this now, I shouldn't, but I'm gonna say this. John and I were asked to present the environmental work of this study to the Friends of the Rappahannock. And one of their members had a really radical proposal, which I've not thought of, and which I don't know what the local community will think of it. But they said, instead of building a bridge over Sanford Drive, why not put it at an at-grade intersection, but close off the residential part of Sanford Drive from US 17, like a cul-de-sac.
So you couldn't get to 17 from Sanford Drive.
Yes, but you could get onto the new road and exit just one block up. Because what it would do is keep the commercial traffic off of Sanford Drive, but remove the necessity to build this big concrete bridge over Sanford Drive. And it still provides access just one block up. VDOT does not like roads that enter like US 17 very close to the spaghetti interchange because it messes with the traffic flow. So the less traffic you pump onto 17 that close to the intersection, the better the traffic flow on 17. I've never thought of that idea, right? And I know it's got all sorts of ramifications, but you can't just make that decision. But public comment is public comment, and he gave it as his public comment. This is my comment on your study. So we take it on board as a comment from the public. Maybe in the NEPA study, we'll have to think about that.
I don't think it's much traffic at all.
Anyway, it's just a thought. I've never thought of it. New idea to me that I've never thought.
So the next item is the feedback on the FY24 SS4A grant award.
Yeah, this I'm afraid is bad news, folks.
Well, you know,
I think. Yeah.
I'm a more optimistic. Thought about it over the weekend. We had a half-hour debrief from Federal Highways on our FY24 grant submission. Very constructive input. I want to underline that on this whole thing. It has some great input from FHWA. Our supplemental action plan applications were involving a high crash triangle at Caroline and Spotsylvania County to do modeling of different options that were proposed in prior safety studies. And we were not clear on the public involvement and we did not articulate how the outcomes would address the safe systems approach. The partial award, a scope that we received for 3 road safety audits in Spotsylvania County, also include the cost to have the successful consultant planning level cost estimates and concept plans for short-term, mid-term, and long-range improvements to those 3 roads, with the long-term improvements being to create a forgiving roadside with transversible and recoverable side slopes. And so that is the scope of that. The reason for the success in the grant headings in the notice of funding opportunity, road safety audits are listed as a specific example. There's a clear process for that, and the road safety audit itself is a proven safety countermeasure. The most serious thing we heard of on the infrastructure applications, which we submitted, and these were to have VDOT install shoulder hardens on secondary roads, high crash locations, with their upcoming pavement schedule. And the reason they were not awarded is that was those projects must include behavioral and operational safety benefits and a method to measure progress over time. When I prepared the crash reduction benefits of the shoulder hardening, I did not include the crash increase that shoulder hardenings create by increasing speed-related crashes and so forth. So we were, the most serious issue though, and this is what the gentleman directed me to advise you. Although the commitment to zero deaths is not a mandatory self-certification statement, all the award recipients of implementation grants for the prior notice of funding opportunity had a committed goal of zero deaths by a specific date. Now, reason I want to say, let's not despair over this, because our plan is with this award that we have in Spotsylvania County is to apply for implementation grants with FY 25 for the short-term improvements. So we are the only planning district that applied for an implementation grant where we do not own and maintain our own roadways. So what I propose to you, when, not if, we submit an FY 25 application for the short-term improvements for these 3 roadways, we're going to make a case and tell them we're a planning district commission. We have different tips from them as far as the constructive input to try to create additional community engagement and so forth with our comprehensive safety action plan, but we don't own and maintain our own roadways. So I don't want us to despair or hang our head that we have to commit to zero. We can't. We don't own and maintain the road. So that concludes my presentation.
So can I comment on this? The seriousness of this is the following. The implication, they haven't said it the way I'm going to say it now, but the implication is that if the applicant doesn't commit to achieving zero road deaths on that road by a certain date, a date you pick in the future, they're not going to give you the money for the implementation grant. And we as PAMPO, or even as UWRC, we have no control over anything, right? We are a regional body that facilitates, right? Who controls that roadway? Well, partly the county or the city, partly VDOT. So we can't sign we will have zero deaths if we don't control anything on those roads. It would have to come from, I think, Becky's has her own view, and you must listen to her view. She had this engagement, but to me, it says we have to ask, for example, Spotsylvania County to sign a declaration that they are aiming to achieve zero deaths on that roadway by a certain date after implementing these measures, whatever the measures are. That's the one part of it. The other part of it is they're saying you must include some form of public education process as well. You can't just apply for the physical infrastructure. You also have to say, and we're going to go to schools and teach school kids not to speed on this road, or to not speed around a blind corner, or not to drive drunk, or whatever the thing is. So if you don't also include a, however small, educational component, you're also unlikely to ever get an implementation under the current administration. Those 2 points are quite significant to know before we get into the next round of applications. My frustration is it would have been nice to know this 2 years ago, right? Because this was never disclosed before we made the submissions. It's been disclosed afterwards. So like, come on, federal DOT. You know, it's not a game. We're really trying to do our best here. Give us the information before we submit. Tell us that we have to do these 2 things, and that could have been part of our process of deciding which things to do.
So I guess what I would say is this is like a new grant process, and I've heard of this type of thing happening for federal agencies, and it's kind of a learning experience. And I'll say a lot of times, like if you go for like implementation construction grants for like a federal grant, like you have to try like 2 or 3 times before you get it. So I view this as first shot, but we can come back stronger next time. But I guess my question, like with Spotsylvania, we might be willing to do that, but I guess my question is, would that be enough, or like another Stafford at the city? I mean, the city maintains its own roads, so they might be able to do it, but like, you know, Stafford and Spotsylvania don't do that. But we also need to have like VDOT somehow approve that, which VDOT, I think, does have the stated goal of basically having 0 fatalities. But I guess my question is, what is the rest of the state doing? Because I can't imagine that we're the only localities that have this challenge.
So there's not one single grant for implementation that was issued in the state of Virginia, or the state of North Carolina, or the state of the whole Eastern Seaboard except New York. New York got some. But other than New York, the Eastern Seaboard basically got no money. So other people applied,
Right.
and they also got nothing. And we think it's because of these things.
And here we adopted the state, highway safety plan goal, which is to, get crashes to half of the current by 2045. And that's what that's what they've adopted, that's what we adopted. And they did not say, here's what they wanted me to be very clear on what to tell you. That the adoption of zero deaths is not a mandatory self-certification statement. They told me was those who were awarded in 2023 did make the zero deaths. All of those implementation grant applicants own and maintain their own roads. They were tribal lands that own and maintain their own roads and cities. But the other item that's written in the 2024 Notice of Funding Opportunity award criteria must be rural. So for example, when I attended the community practice webinars where folks that have gotten grants like ourselves and applying for implementation grants. So one of the showcase speakers at one of these federal webinars was the city of Richmond. It has a huge staff, huge budget to put in all the great things that they put in. And they had a dynamite implementation project on a high crash order, not granted. The man told me, Secretary Buttigieg, it's the rural crashes and trying to make a difference, a real difference in areas with changing people. That's what we have going. And this is just one criteria. Does your comprehensive safety action plan commit to an aggressive reduction in crashes or zero? So I say we take our best case, we do a great job on our crash reduction benefits and our programs. When we go in for that short-term benefit in the long, mid-range, and long-term, we're going to hire a consultant and say, hey, in addition to telling us the countermeasures to try to reduce runoff road collisions, you give us behavioral and operational countermeasures, which we can then request money for. For example, speed reduction. Put that shoulder wedge on River Road. All right, give me some countermeasures. I can measure the speed reduction benefits for this project. So we need to go more into the behavioral and operational, in addition to the implementation, put our best foot forward, and don't try to commit to zero just because we think we're going to get a grant. Let's focus on the important things we can change. We tell them we're a planning district, man. And look at the things that we can use our public engagement officer to get the Yavoso programs in high school. And maybe there's money for staff time to really bolster. This is award-winning in itself, that a PDC in Virginia can put together opportunities for FY25. And let's not try to, complain about the fact that in 23, they were awarded only to the zero death commitments.
I mean, Becky and I haven't discussed and shared with you now, but I'm starting to lean towards saying that the jurisdiction should submit the application form on behalf of the jurisdiction. Because some of those things that we can commit to, Tampa can't. We literally can't. And they didn't tend to award money to MPOs and PDCs for implementation grants. Could be wrong.
You're the one that applied.
Yeah, so I think that might count against us, that we can't commit to some of those. But go to your jurisdiction school and do an education plan with a class of kids. That's okay. We put the jurisdiction to own that educational aspect. And so I'm kind of thinking that we can help prepare it all. maybe the jurisdiction should submit the application because they can give a convincing argument that we'll work on doing this stuff. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, this is new information. We're gonna have to modify our implementation from next time. Not just do what we did last time.
Thank you very much. So I would like to close this, and I guess like in the interest of time, I'm gonna actually, I know you did talk about the calendar briefly earlier, like if anyone has any comments on the calendar, maybe if they can just let the Fampo staff know, but I'm gonna actually ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a second.
Thanks, everyone. Don't forget on my copy, Mike.